welcome to Portumna Castle Gardens. My name is Lynn O'Keefe-Lasker and I'm the craft gardener here with the OPW in the kitchen garden belonging to Portumna Castle. This garden is as old as the castle itself, so that's about 400 years old. And this would have been in use for a few hundred years. There was an archaeological dig in the 1990s which showed these paths up into their original position with the drains underneath, and then after that it was taken on by a community group from Portumna town itself, and in here with a group of community workers they would have grown an awful lot of fruit and vegetables. They planted the willow maize for basket weaving and they sold their produce in the local country market. It was run by Ruth Carty and it was on the go here for the best part of 20 years. Subsequently, I was employed in 2015 to take on the garden. So the planting here isn't historically accurate. This is a garden full of a wide range of plants. So I have soft fruit areas, I have vegetable beds, there's herbaceous borders, there's shrubberies, there's herbs, there's flowers, and I like to grow a lot of flowers and allow some of the vegetables to flower because we have an awful lot of bees and pollinators in the garden too. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you for a walk down and we're going to have a look at the south wall and we're going to talk about the difference between the different walls in the walled garden and why they were built, why did they go to so much effort to enclose these gardens, and what was the benefit of the different areas within the gardens for growing your fruit and vegetables. So we'll take you on a walk now down to the south wall. So Walden Gardens were a classic feature of all the old houses and castles in Ireland. Some gardens were multiple Walden Gardens together. They were about protecting the garden from the wildlife that was outside, be that cattle that might have been loose in commonage or deers as we have currently in the woods here in Portumna. They would have also kept out the locals to a certain extent, the hungry children who might have climbed the wall and come in to steal the food that was grown within the walls. But the main reason for having walled gardens in Ireland was to keep the wind out. It was about creating shelter, because the wind chill factor is what really makes growing fruit and veg in Ireland quite difficult. Walden gardens had to be bigger than half an acre and smaller than 4 acres to benefit from the shelter. If they were smaller than half an acre, they were too shady to be worth your while, and if they were bigger than 4 acres, well then they just weren't sheltering anything. So this garden here is over an acre in size. It's a classic shape and size for a walled garden. And what they've done here, which is interesting, is they've put red brick on the south and on the west facing wall, where it was worth the extra expense of the red brick because those walls would hold the heat of the sun shining on them all day, and then that would have been radiated out at night to heat the plants that would have been grown on the wall. They would have grown sweet fruits on these walls where the sun is warmest. So your sweet eating apple, your sweet eating plum, your sweet eating pear, and maybe even an apricot or a peach, depending on how warm they were able to get it. On your east and your north wall, it wasn't worth the extra expense, so they're just stone faced, and on those walls you grow the fruits that weren't as sweet. Your cooking apple, your cooking pear, and your cooking plum or damson. And that's basically because sunshine in terms of fruit equals sugars and sweetness. So your sour fruits or your cooking fruits you could grow in the shadier walls of your east and north, and on your south walls then you were able to grow the sweet fruits. We don't have any fruits planted onto these walls because these bricks are very delicate now, being 400 years old, and to try and hammer in nails and put up wires would just be to damage them. So we get to have a nice look and see at these beautiful 400-year-old red bricks along the south-facing wall in Portumna. And to make it look beautiful, we have all these wonderful herbaceous borders all along these walls for people to enjoy. So you could come and visit our garden and you could have a seat here and have a look across the flowers and the vegetables to the castle in Portumna. Now, so we've come to this part of the garden, which is where the real access was, because unlike the other formal gardens and the ladies' garden, this kitchen garden would not have been regularly visited by the Earl or the lady of the house. This was a functioning food growing area. So what we have here is we have a large double gate which goes out into the yard to the side of the castle, where you would have had all the servants' quarters and possibly a head gardener's house and stables and everything. But also you have access straight into the kitchens that you could literally go in with a donkey and cart with produce into the kitchens in the basement of the castle. So this would have been where the produce gathered from the walled garden went out straight into the kitchens, and then on return they could have picked up manure from the stables and compost from the midden and brought it in to fertilise the gardens. So this is really where the traffic was coming and going, and that's why if you visit these gardens you'll see that the door in is actually quite small. You wouldn't have fitted through with a large dress on at all. And then over here we have another couple of doors which would have gone out to other service areas. This wouldn't have been a pretty garden. This would have been rows and rows of vegetables and fruits and herbs. So what I want to show you now is some of the different herbs that they would have grown in this garden and why they would have grown them. So we'll go over to the herb garden. Now, so growing herbs would have been a really important part of the job of the head gardener and the gardeners working at the castle. You had to grow herbs for a variety of reasons. You had to grow them for flavouring food, and they might have had to have been quite strong flavoured because the food didn't have a refrigerator to go into and meat could have been tainted or quite gamey. You had to grow them for medicinal purposes, cosmetic purposes, and also what are known as strewing herbs, which are herbs that were spread on the floor of the castle along with straw to keep the castle smelling sweet or to keep parasites away. And you also had to grow herbs for making soaps and for washing things. And we have saponaria in the garden as well, which would have been used for that. So what we have here are examples. I have wormwood, which is this large silvery plant. And as the name suggests, it would have been used for the treatment of intestinal worms in people. It has a really bitter flavour. And then down here I have lavender, and that was sweet smelling. So the wormwood would have been a medicinal herb and the lavender would have been a strewing herb. Other southern woods were used for putting on the floor along with strewing herbs to keep fleas and parasites off. Here I have an interesting one. I have monk's hood, or wolfsbane as it's known, which is a very poisonous plant which was used to make a poison for arrow tips for the hunting of wolves, and that's why it's called wolfsbane. And it's mentioned in Harry Potter for the treatment of werewolves by Snape making up a potion. Over here I have feverfew, which was used for the treatment of fevers and for headaches. And some people still use it for the treatment of headaches. So the herbs were really important, and they would have grown huge quantities of them. If you can imagine the amount of herbs you need to strew on the floor of a great hall or on all the bedroom chambers in a castle, it would have been something they grew on bulk in a garden like this. So it's always interesting to show the herbs to visitors and to get kids to smell them, and we have them all labelled clearly so you can see what they are. Thank you for visiting the garden with me here today, and I hope to see you in the flesh sometime coming around the gardens of Portumna Castle.